Hey everybody, Jeremy from Follow Me Leadership, and I want to talk to you today. This is going to be part one of a multi-part series on social media and the workplace. Over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, social media has become pretty controversial when it comes to younger generations entering the workforce, as well as people that have been there for quite some time that are engaging in social media. And I think it's important for everyone to understand who's has a job at a big corporation and how social media affects your employment, and also understand it from the perspective of the employer as well. Um, I think the bigger the company, the more likely your company is going to have some level of policy when it comes to social media. And I think it's important to remember that every corporation and even small company has the right to protect their own image, especially when it comes to how their employees portray themselves and things that they do in their lives and in the workplace, when they're posting and kind of putting themselves out there on social media. There's also a lot of companies out there that are mandating as part of the hiring process that you give them access. You actually would sign a contract giving them access to your social media so that they can take a look at your posts and see what kind of activity you're doing behind the scenes, on weekends and at nights, maybe what you've done over the last several years. It just depends on the company because a lot of them are trying to protect their image, and I think it's important to understand it from both sides of the perspective, so you don't get shocked and you don't get hurt by the whole process. So, how do we survive then in this world of social media as it relates to our jobs, employment, either in a big corporation or small companies? I think there's a bunch of rules that we can follow. Some are more important than others, but I think there's kind of 10 things to really think about. First and foremost, never engage in any discussion about your company or your work environment or the people you work with or customers or anything on social media unless it's encouraged or you're directed to. There might be a job that you hold where you're encouraged to utilize your position in social media to help promote the company or help advertise things. Maybe that's part of your job. Maybe you're in charge of social media. But you could just have a normal staff job. You're working as a receptionist or you're working as a sales rep or somebody in the warehouse or wherever. It doesn't matter. Just don't engage in anything with regards to work on social media unless you know for sure your employer is okay with that. Second important rule, and probably the most important one, because it's very specific to the industry. If you are in any sort of healthcare related field, anything dealing with medicine or the general public and their health and well being, never, ever, ever discuss anything about your workplace. I don't care if you think you're talking in the hypothetical and you're using an example of, a fictitious person to describe an actual event that happened at work. Um, you'll be lucky if you don't get fired, first off. But you can be sued for these things. Just don't do it. So if you work in a hospital, you're in EMS, maybe you work in a transport company, you work in a doctor's office, a dialysis unit. I don't care what it is. If it's related to the health and well-being of other people, never, ever mention anything about work. And again, like I said, with the hypotheticals, if something happened at work and you're a nurse, let's say, or you're even if you just work in a cafeteria at a hospital and you saw somebody have a seizure and someone else didn't deal with it so well, don't talk about that in social media, even if you're referencing nothing about specifically about where you work or who it was or what time of day it was. Just don't do it. Trust me, you're going to get fired. And that would be the best case scenario for you. Rule number 3, think before you post on weekends or nights when you're out at a party or at a bar, barbecue or an event or anything, and there's alcohol involved. I always call this, the grandparent check. It's something I tell my kids before they post something or say something, that don't do it. Don't post anything about that unless you're willing to let your grandmother or your grandfather see what you just did. It's a good rule of thumb, and I think generally everybody wants their grandparents to think very highly of them and think the most of them. And I think that's a good way to keep you safe. Rule number 4, and it's an extension of rule number 3. Make sure your friends understand your position on social media, especially as it relates to your career, your job, your workplace. When you're out with them on, at a bar or at a party or something on a weekend or a weeknight. You may not be in the workplace, you may be after hours, and they're certainly not thinking about your well-being and your career as they're taking photos of you and everyone else doing something really stupid. All right, rule number 5, and this is kind of a Darwin rule. Don't ever post anything on social media when you're taking the day off from work or an unauthorized absence, or you're blowing off work, basically. I shouldn't even really have to explain that, but there are a lot of people that get busted because they call in sick at work, or they take a day off to go to the doctor's office, and then they're posting pictures of them at the bar or at a amusement park or whatever, and somebody's always going to find out. And you may not be connected with your employer on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, but somebody in your company might be connected with you. Somebody who's related to somebody in your company might be connected to you, and they see your postings, and then they show that to somebody who then shows it to somebody. Think before you do that. Okay, rule number 6, and I think this is a good policy to have, especially in big corporations. I wouldn't friend a lot of people on Facebook and Instagram that you work with. I think it's okay for people that you're close with, teammates that you've known for several years, people that are in the same boat as you, but I see all too often, especially in a big corporate world, where a lot of people use Facebook and Instagram as a networking tool within their company. And while that's okay, you just have to remember that you're now connected to lots of people at the headquarters, lots of people up the chain of command, or you're connected to lots of people who are friends with people up the chain of command. And as you start to post things, those things get seen. So I always tried to steer away from, when I worked at a big corporation, I didn't really friend up anybody on Facebook that worked for my company. I had maybe 2 or 3 people that I connected with, and it kind of kept me from having to explain myself or answer questions or even just worry about whether or not it's going to affect, my performances and ratings and whatnot. So the other thing is, well, all the different social media platforms out there, sometimes it can be a good idea to keep some of them for you and then some of them for work. But you really don't want to ever mix the two. So if you want to use, let's say, LinkedIn as a means to connect for work type purposes, that's a great tool. It was kind of built for that purpose. It's not necessarily built just to find a new job, but it's actually built to try to maybe find new customers, new vendors, new people to collaborate with. You can do that with Facebook. You can do it with some other tools. I think it's a good rule of thumb to not try to mix the two themes, if you will. So if you're going to use Facebook for posting pictures of your dog and your friends and things you do on weekends, vacations, then maybe you don't want to also link up with everybody you work with or customers. I always like to think about, if you're go on vacations, let's say, and you go down to the Caribbean, do you really want to have everybody you work with or customers you interact with looking at your pictures of you on the beach in a bathing suit? I think it's good to separate them, and there's enough platforms out there that can kind of fit both roles, one for a more personal life and one for more of a work life. So there are a lot of companies out there that are, I wouldn't say demanding, but basically setting up their employees with a LinkedIn account because they want them to use that site exclusively for workplace networking, whether you're trying to build customers or build collaborations or just people within the industry. A lot of companies have found that LinkedIn can be a great tool to help with that, and that's fine. They may even set up a day for everyone to come in, dressed in their best suit or whatever to get a nice LinkedIn photo. If that's something that your company's doing, you know what, go with it. And, LinkedIn's a perfect site to actually be an adult. You don't have to worry about posting pictures of your dog or, silly things you did on the weekend or whatever. That's really a good workplace type social networking site. But just keep that in mind. It, kind of goes along with, keeping things separate, between personal and work life. Okay, rule number 9. I think this is more of just a social media awareness policy, that you need to understand that anything that you like or put a smiley face on or a frowny face on, like on Facebook, if somebody posts an article or a piece of news or whatever, when you like those things, when you put your mean face on it or whatever it is you're doing, that gets noticed by other people. It's something that can be seen, it can be searchable. So just be aware if there's a controversial issue that you don't support, and maybe you don't have a position on it publicly, but in the confines of your own mind and at home, it's not an issue you support, and you put a frowny face on something, or if you support a controversial person out there, let's say, and you like their articles, like things that they stand for, just remember that other people can see that, even if you're not connected to them directly. And I think it's just a good policy to have as you go forward. So just remember, as something gets posted out there, especially on like Facebook, just know that whatever you like and click on and forward or whatever, other people can see that. So again, it just goes back to having the awareness of how the system works and how it can potentially backfire on you depending on what you're willing to put out there as far as issues and things that you stand for or stand against. Lastly, if you can't are having a hard time separating the two, social media between your work life and social life, I do know some people that basically create a husband and wife page, or a family page, if you will, and they might call it the Smith family or Joanne and Bob's Facebook page, whatever it is, and they use that for interacting with family and sending pictures and taking videos of the dog or vacation stuff. That way they might still have their own personal page, and they post a few things on there so that people know who they are or who they work for or whatever. But at least the family page is a little bit more benign. It also kind of keeps you from getting maybe too controversial or potentially offensive if you're partnering with your entire family or with your spouse or partner on a Facebook page. So just something to think about. So hopefully that helps. Again, social media is a huge controversial thing over the last decade in the corporate world. It's not an easy thing to deal with. If you don't like your social media policy at your company, if it's something that they're trying to enact or recently enact, you can certainly voice concerns of it. But I think first and foremost, just understand that every company, I don't care how big they are, how small they are, they have a right to protect their own image. And that kind of extends to the people they employ. So if you engage in activity on the weekends that they don't really want to be a part of their image, then they're going to want to know about it, and you potentially could be terminated for it. So just know that. I will be posting another piece on this as far as this is really more for the younger generations in high school and college, and what they're posting and getting prepared to enter the corporate world and what to expect when it comes to social media. But hopefully that helps. If you have any questions on it or have any experiences on that where something came back to bite you in the butt, or you have challenges you're dealing with, please email me at the email address below, or DM me on Instagram, and I'll see if I can help guide you through the process. Take care.